intersection of making art and making money. Hi, and welcome, YouTube viewer. You are about to watch a video of me recording the audio podcast, Explore Your Enthusiasm. You can find it on iTunes or Stitcher or at tarswiger.com, but that is why I'm looking down. My notes are kind of right below the camera. And I broadcast this live on Periscope, so if you're into Periscope, follow me there. If not, you can find the recordings of this and all future podcast episodes here on YouTube, so subscribe to the channel, and you will also get edited versions of the best Periscope lessons, about one every 2 weeks, so be sure you've subscribed. But thank you so much for watching, and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about 4 steps you can take to sound like a human and not a robot so you can connect with your customers and sell more stuff. So let's get started. Do you feel nervous about sharing your work on social media or your blog? Do you worry that you're too salesy and that you end up sounding kind of like a robot? Well, you are not alone in that, and that's what we're going to discuss today. Hello and welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 94 with me, Swiger. Before we get into it, I want to let you know that you can download today's podcast transcript at tarswiger.com/episode 94. Scroll down, you'll see a box, put in your email address, and you'll get the PDF delivered to you. We just started that system, and I wanted to let you know, soon every podcast episode will have a transcript that you can get delivered directly to your inbox by putting in your email address at the bottom. So for this episode, it's tarswiger.com/episode 94. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about why it's important to sound like a human and not a robot online, why this actually matters, and why you should spend some time getting good at it. We're also going to talk about the 2 mistakes people usually make when using social media, the ways that they become awkward or stilted or ineffective on social media. And then we're going to cover 4 steps to sound like a human, connect with your customers without getting uncomfortably, weirdly personal. So, being a real person and not sounding like a robot online, especially in social media, which is supposed to be social and chatty and conversational, it's super important to the health of your business. And we don't usually have much problem acting like a normal human being in person. But when we get online, things get weird. Perfectly charming, wonderful, engaging people get awkward and sound very formal and odd and not at all like a human that you would connect with or have a relationship with. Or they start to sound really weirdly salesy. And I completely get that. It can be really hard to translate who you are into just words and pictures. It can be hard for your personality to come across online and to connect with your people in a way that doesn't feel weird or awkward, especially when you know you have a mission. You have a mission to share more of your work with the world, and when you try to connect with that mission in mind, sometimes it comes across super weird. But it is important for you to learn how to do it and for you to be a person who connects with other people online and in person. So not only is it going to help you use social media to sell more stuff, but it's also going to help you build more and deeper relationships with your customers. It's going to help a potential buyer understand the awesomeness of what you offer and how it's different and special. Because when you sound formal and stilted or you get weird and salesy, it doesn't help the buyer connect to what you're saying and what's special about your work, and it turns them off or it turns them away or it just doesn't give them the details they need in order to make the decision if your thing is right for them. So it's super important for those reasons, because you want to build more and deeper relationships, because you want to sell more stuff, and because you want to easily and clearly communicate your message to the people who most need to hear it. And yet, when you get uncomfortable, it's really easy to get this wrong, especially if you're telling yourself, oh my goodness, this is really important, I have to figure this out. So I see this happen in 2 main ways. When people are nervous to share their work, they usually default into 2 extremes on a continuum. Now, the one extreme of the continuum is that you get really formal and professional, and I'm putting air quotes around professional, or you automate too much. So your stream of messages is like, this is new in my shop, this is now for sale, this is what you can buy. Maybe you set up Etsy to automatically tweet, or Facebook when you list a new item, and then that's all you do on that social media tool. And that's okay to automate it, but when all of your messages are automated, this is new, this is new, this is new, that's a major turnoff, and you definitely seem like a robot. Or if you just post a picture of your product to Instagram with just a bunch of hashtags, that's not connecting. That's not building a relationship. That seems more like you're just being like, here it is, and you're throwing it up there. You don't do this to be spammy. I know you don't. But because you feel awkward and you aren't comfortable saying more, that's what you default to. But no matter how much you might share in that way, no matter how often you do it, and I want to be clear, if you have to force yourself to share your work and you feel like a robot and it feels like you're always forcing it, you're going to be less likely to do it. So the people who default to this robotic sharing tend to not even do it as much as they need to. They tend to not share their work or invite people to buy their work as much as they need to because they feel so bad about it. But no matter how much you do it, if you do it like a robot, it's not going to be effective. If you automate a bunch of really bland, this is new kind of messages, it's not going to be effective at all. No matter how often you do it, it's not going to reach people and connect with them and get them to purchase your thing. And that means you're forcing yourself to do something you don't like and that your potential customers don't like, and it won't be effective. Now that sucks. That's not the way you should be spending any of your business time, doing things you hate to do that your customers don't like for you to do and is ineffective. Like, no, that is not how we want to be spending your time. Now, that's one extreme of what people default to when they're uncomfortable. The other extreme that I see people default to when they're uncomfortable is using their business tools in the same way they would a personal social tool. Now, I know a lot of makers fall into this category because their personal hobby transforms into a business. So you, say, started using Facebook or your Instagram to just show what you were crafting, and then you turn that crafting into a business, but you're still talking on there like you're just talking to your friends. So you're used to sharing it for personal reasons, and then when you have a business, you start using it the same way. But none of that is a problem until you think and until you get frustrated wondering, why isn't this getting me more customers? Why isn't this working as a sales tool? Now, there is a third option that some people default to, and we're not going to go too much into it today, but I see it a lot, and that is not saying anything, not sharing your work at all, never mentioning it because you're not sure what to say or you're afraid that you're going to mess it up. So if that's you, if that's the third option where you just don't use any tool, I want to invite you to get comfortable and to get more confident in your work and to choose a tool that will work for you. Now, my book, Market Yourself, walks you through this process. So if you find that you're not using any tool at all, check out Market Yourself. It'll help you identify what to say about your work, who you're connecting to, and it'll even help you pick a tool that's going to be best for both you and your customers. You can find it on Amazon, just search Market Yourself, or you can get a signed copy from me at tarswiger.com/book. Now, those are the three options, two sides of the extreme, and then just the total silence. But I want you to avoid all of these because none of them work. I haven't seen them work for anyone, and I've talked to many, many makers about what they're doing and what's increasing their sales on social media. None of those work. But I want to be clear. When I talk about being a person online, okay, so I said that there's the extreme of you're a robot, and then there's extreme of like you're using it as a personal tool. When I talk about being a person and getting away from sounding like a robot, I'm not talking about sharing every detail of your life, or as we talked about in episode 81 of the podcast, being a hot mess online. So if you want to know more about being authentic and not being a hot mess, check out episode 81, which is called How to Be Authentic Without Being a Hot Mess. Episode 81 of Explore Your Enthusiasm. We talk more about kind of how to keep that from happening, how to not go from being a robot to being like way too authentic, air quotes around authentic, when you share online. But in this episode, I wanted to talk about actual steps you can take to share more. But again, I'm not talking about oversharing. What I'm talking about is genuinely connecting as a real person. I'm talking about sharing the part of your personality and your experience and your ideas that help your customer. Not just sharing everything about you that you want to say about yourself, but sharing the bits of your personality, your experience, your ways you use your product, your ways your friends use your product that's going to help your ideal buyer or your reader. Preferably something that helps them understand the value and the awesomeness of what you're doing. Because remember, the goal isn't to sound like a human just to make you feel better and just to make you feel cool. The goal isn't to get a zillion followers who love you because just they love you. The goal is to connect with a community of people who are going to love and adore your product and who your product is right for and help them see how your product is right for them. Okay, so that's the goal with all of the social media. So that now brings us to the 4 things you can do to sound like a person online and sell more stuff. You ready? Number 1, I want you to be intentional with how you use your tools. In other words, decide what your intention for this specific tool is. How do you want to use it? What do you want it to do for you? Where does this fit in your business and your goals? Now, it's perfectly fine to use any tool that you want to for personal reasons, but know that that's what you're doing. So for the longest time, I used Pinterest to save recipes and gift ideas and decorating ideas for myself. So Pinterest was not a tool that ever sent anyone to my website because I didn't pin my own stuff and I didn't use it in a businessy way. For years and years, I just used Pinterest as a personal tool. That's fine. The trick is not to be upset when the tool doesn't send you a lot of sales when you're using it just for personal reasons. So you want to know if you're using it for a business or a personal reason and then use it accordingly. Know your intention for it and then use it based on that intention. Make your actions in alignment with your intentions for that tool. Now, this goes back to knowing what you want to do with your business as a whole, because if you don't have any idea about where you're going in your business, you're not going to know how you want to use those tools to reach it. So we talked about this a lot in the episode about mission, strategy, and tactics. If you want to go back to explore your enthusiasm, it's one of the 80s, I think, one of the late 80s. And we talk about first knowing your mission and then deciding on your strategy and then using your tactics, and your tools fall in the category of tactics. So for starters, if you're not sure if you're really building a business or you're just making some money with a hobby, you got to decide that. That's going to help you decide how you're using your social media tools. And I did a video about this a long time ago called Do You Have a Business or Do You Have a Hobby? You can find it at taraswiger.com/YouTube, where I give you 3 things to distinguish between a business and a hobby. Because if it's a hobby, then keep using your social media tools for your personal reasons. But if it's a business, what do you want out of that business? What are your goals for that business? What are you trying to do with the business? And how does this social media tool fit inside that? That's what I mean by be intentional with your tools. Know what you want it to do for your business, and that should be related to the bigger goal of what you want your business to do. The second step is to decide where this tool falls for your customer in their customer path. So it's very easy to talk about marketing from your perspective. I do this, I do that, I share it in this way. But your customer is experiencing it totally differently. They might not be coming at you in the order you think they are. Your customer path is simply the path that your customer walks down to get to you. They have to find you, right? Discover you, fall in love with you, get to know more about you, and when I say you, I mean your product, right? Realize how they're going to use your product, what's special about your product, what's valuable about the product, why it is why it costs what it costs. And then the final step of the customer path is that they buy. Now, every tool you use fits somewhere on your customer's path. You're using the tool so that more people discover you, right? Like maybe you use hashtags on Instagram so that more people can find you on Instagram. In that case, your Instagram feed is one of the first things people find out about you. Your newsletter might be the fall in love with you stage, where they get to know you more and more because they liked you, they found you, they liked you, they signed up to hear more. So your newsletter is often to people who are in the middle part of your path. They already know that you exist, they know what you sell, and they want to know more. They want to be convinced to buy. And then there are tools that you're going to use that actually close the sale, like your shop and the buy button, or a clear call to action on your newsletter or your Instagram feed or your tweets that say, go here to buy this. Okay, so you want to think about, what is this tool that I'm thinking about? Where does it hit the customers on their path? Am I talking to brand new people who don't know me at all? Am I talking to people who know me and follow me specifically because they want to learn more? Am I talking to people who are ready to buy and I need to direct them on how to buy? Now, lots of tools hit people a lot of parts in the path. That's totally normal. But you want to think, how am I using this tool to best serve the people where they are in their path? So, you want to think, are you using it to talk to the people who just found you, or are you using it to talk to the people who have been following you and like you? Because that is going to determine how personal, how personable, and how informative you get. Now, an example from my own business is Instagram. For a while, I thought the people who were, and for a while this was true, the people who were following me on Instagram were just a small percentage of the total amount of people who already followed me and liked me. They listened to my podcast, they subscribed to my newsletter, and then maybe they followed me on Instagram. So it was the middle part of the path. So I was just like sharing, oh, I'm traveling to teach. Oh, my dogs are cute. I was sharing things as if you already know me and what I do. But when I started to use hashtags and I found more and more people were following me that were perfect strangers, that weren't already subscribing to my stuff or reading my blog or listening to my podcast, I realized if I'm going to use hashtags that helps totally new people find me, then I need to, on a regular basis, be giving information on Instagram as if you have no idea what I do. So if all I do is share on Instagram a bunch of pictures of my knitting progress, that doesn't tell you anything about why you might actually be following me professionally and my professional life. So I changed up what I share on Instagram. I more regularly talk about what I actually do in my work, and I found that Instagram has become a much more effective tool for helping people take the next step in the customer path, which for me is subscribing to my newsletter. And it also helps the people who are in the middle of the path when I talk directly about, hey, I have this new class open, you can go register here. It helps those people who are ready to buy actually move to the next step and buy. But it took me a while. It actually took me around last October. I started talking to some other people about how they were using Instagram, and I realized I've got it totally wrong. I've been thinking it's the middle part of my path, when in fact it was more at the beginning part of my path. Total strangers who didn't know about what I did were following me there, so I needed to give them information there in order to help them move to the next step. So that's the second thing. Think about where this lies on your customer path and what kind of information you want to share with those people at that part of your path on that tool. Now, the third piece about sounding like a human is to remember that you set the parameters of how much you share. We're talking about sounding like yourself, not sharing everything you think. There is a spectrum, and you can move from the never share anything side of the spectrum to the overshare every detail of my life spectrum step by step. You're not going to like fall on the other end of it, but people often think of it as a slippery slope where there is the sound like a robot, never say anything, and at the bottom of the slippery slope is accidentally overshare, like share pictures from the inside of my guts after surgery or something. But it's not a slippery slope. They think if I take one step off the edge of sounding robotic, I'm gonna like plummet down into, oh no, I share everything. When that's just not true. It's not. If anything, it's like a hill you have to climb. It becomes harder to share things that are more about who you are as a real person. And again, I'm not talking about the like gory, super personal details. I'm just saying, what inspires you to make what you make? How do you use what you make? What prompted you to start your business? How do you feel about being a person in business? How do you feel about your customers? How do you feel about the interactions? That is more personal, it's less robotic, and yet it's actually harder to share. So you're not going to slip down some slope and fall into a pit of oversharing. I promise you, I have never seen anyone accidentally fall into the pit of oversharing. So when you remember, you set the parameters of what you share, and you get to set them every single day, every single share, every single post, all anew. But it helps if you think it through ahead of time. It helps if you decide, this is how I could become more personable and more myself and share more of my personality on the social media tool without falling down the slope of oversharing. So I like to think about this as layers. Now, keep in mind, each layer of more personable, more personality, more being yourself is in service to your customers and your product in your business. That's why the number one thing was to get intentional about how you're using this tool. Decide what you're using it for. If you're using it to build your business, and that's all we're talking about now, we're not talking about the tools you use for personal reasons. If you're using it to connect with customers, then everything you share is in service of connecting with the customer who is best going to love and use your product and helping her understand why and how she's going to love and use your product. So I like to think about this in terms of layers. Like, let's think of really huge layer cake. Now, the top layer, the very like tippity top layer, is I make and sell this thing. You could even be less personal, less deep than that, and it could just be I sell this thing. Then the actual act of you making it and making a thing that you're passionate about, that you're excited about, that's like one tiny level deeper. Then the layer right under that is I make it and I'm inspired by X, Y, and Z. Or I had this experience and that's why I make this thing. Now, a layer slightly deeper than that, and deeper is in sharing more personality, is you can share what inspires you to make it, or how you learned the craft as a kid, or how making it has changed your life, or how using it has changed your life, or even the stories of your friends, family members, and customers. That's like slightly deeper. That's slightly more being a person and less being a robot. But you see how none of it is really like personal, deep, dark, secret-y stuff, right? The layers under that might be like how you use it in your own home with your family, or how your kids use it. Then layers under that are maybe like childhood and families and relationships. And then way deep is a layer about, you know, like your deep dark secrets or childhood traumas or things like that. But you never have to get to those way deep down layers, because usually A, that's not in service of your customers, and B, it's not like related to your product at all. But I wanted you to know, you get to decide what your layers are, and you get to decide where the cutoff is. So an example from my own business and life is that, so the tippy top layer would be, I teach classes and write books. The layer underneath that would be, I teach classes and write books for makers because I love makers, because I was a hand maker. I mean, I am a hand maker. I started my own handmade business, blah, blah, my business history for the past 10 years. A layer underneath that is I'm a child of 2 Marines, and their very disciplined, self-disciplined, self-directed nature inspired the way I approach my business. And a layer slightly below that is, man, sometimes business is hard and stressful and scary. And sometimes I really struggle to have the confidence to do the steps I know I need to do in my business. And knowing that, and having heard that from so many of my people, I created the Biz Confidence Challenge to challenge all of us to take the steps that are harder in our business. So you see, that's a layer more of my personality, and it's also harder to share, that personal stuff. So like I said, it's like a hill you gotta climb to share more personal things. However, that's kind of the cutoff for me. That's the end of my layers. So you might know that my parents were both Marines, and you might know that as a kid, I went to California every year, because I've shared Instagram of pictures going back to California to visit my dad. I see him every summer. So that kind of lets you know my parents were divorced when I was a kid. But I don't ever talk about that, right? I never talk about what it was like to be a divorced kid or a child of divorce. Honestly, I don't think about it that much. So I definitely don't talk about it in my stuff. I also don't talk about my parents and the decisions they made in their life that really impacted my childhood. I grew up for a good portion of my childhood really poor. I don't talk about that or the reasons behind it. A lot of people's stories is how they started from nothing and then built a business and now made way more money. That's also my story too. I make way more money now than my parents did it when I was a kid, and yet that's not a part of my story that I've made a big part of my public persona, in part because I think of that as my parents' story, and it doesn't really feel like my stuff I'm willing to share. There's a bunch of stuff in deeper layers that we could go way deeper, family trauma stuff, that although my work has tons of my personality in it, it has so me. I sound exactly like myself on Instagram, on Twitter, my podcast, on Periscope. It is fully me. There are still layers that I don't dig into. And that's what I mean, that it's not a slippery slope. You can bring tons of your personality without telling people about everything that's ever happened in your life. And the same thing is true. So that's like childhood examples, but the same thing is true in my life today. I might tell you guys, hey, I moved into a new house. Hey, I'm recording today's video in my new office. But I don't talk to you about my marriage or those problems, right? We don't go deeper than what I've decided I want to go, and yet I can still bring tons of personality and connect as a real person. And if you've ever met me at a conference or a class or a workshop, you know, like, I love to make friends with my students, and we go out to eat and we chat, and it's a great time. We're connecting as real human beings. And yet I didn't slip down some slope of accidentally sharing too much. So that's what I want you to keep in mind, is that you set the parameters of how much and when you want to share stuff. So the layers you want to keep related to how they are going to best serve your people. And you can tell it even in this very podcast episode, right? Like I mentioned what my layers are, but only as an example for how you're going to set your layers. So the thing to keep in mind is that the first layer is really just factual. It's not personable, it's not friendly. If you stay at the very tip-top layer, I sell this thing, you're like not gonna connect in any way with people who are looking to buy something from a real person. And that's the heart of why so many people buy handmade things or things from artists, is because they wanna feel that personal connection. They wanna feel that there's a person behind it. That's also how you can charge a price that gives you what you deserve, because they have a connection with a real person, because there's a bigger story behind it. And the next layers in our layer cake, they're not about you as much as they are about your thing. So you can go deeper and show more of your personality and more of who you are, and yet still keep it focused on your thing, because again, the goal of all these tools when you're using them for your business is to connect with the people who are going to love and use your product. So you want to keep your focus on that. When you think about being more personable, showing more of your personality, being friendlier, being more of yourself to your business, you're not doing it just to share yourself. You're doing it to help the person who's going to buy your thing. You're doing it to connect with them. And when I say help, your thing might not even be help necessarily. It might be a gorgeous piece of jewelry. It might be a piece of art that goes on their wall. But by letting them get to know you, the artist, and especially how you're inspired to make it, what your intention is behind making it, you are helping them see what it means, the value behind it, the story behind it, and that is going to help them feel more connected to it and help them actually have a better experience of buying it. So you're showing them why the product matters, what its story is, and or how it fits in their life. And that's doing a service to the buyer who wants to buy it, but wants to know that you created it with love, or that you're inspired by a sunset, or that you're a big Doctor Who nerd too. So that's number 3. You get to set the parameters. The 4th thing is so simple: practice. You've got to practice. Anything in your business, from photography to writing descriptions to being a real human being online, it takes practice. You're going to get better the more you practice it. So I want you to practice writing Instagram descriptions as you would actually talk or sound. I want you to practice rewriting your descriptions in your shop that use the words that your customers use to describe it, the customers real people use to talk about it. Just like with anything, you're going to need to practice to make it better. And there's an early episode of Explore Your Enthusiasm where I think it's titled just Practice. And I talk about all the different things you can practice there. It was based on a question that somebody asked about how they can get comfortable talking about their work in person at a craft show. The answer is practice. Practice what you're going to say. Practice how you share things online in a way that shows more personality. So practice is going to make it easier, and also it's going to make it more obvious the parts that really connect with your people and the parts that are like, maybe not so much. So practice it. So again, the 4 ways to sound more like a human online. The first one is to get intentional with the tools you use. Get very clear about what your intention for the tool is. The second thing is to decide where this fits on your customer path and use the tool to talk to the people who are there on your customer path. The third is to remember that you set the parameters of what and how much you share. Nobody else does, you do. So get confident that you can set those parameters and do the right thing. And then the 4th thing is just to practice sounding like a real human, to practice sounding like yourself. The more you write online, the more you'll start to sound like yourself. This is true for all writing, online or not. The more you write, or the more you talk, or the more you speak, or the more you teach, the more you'll sound like yourself, and you'll find your own voice. So if you want to dive more into what you can say or talk about when you talk about your work, and you want to help choose the tools that are going to best help your marketing, check out my book, Market Yourself. You can find it on Amazon, or you can get a signed copy direct from me at taraswiger.com/book. We dig deep into, there's lots of worksheets for you to decide what you want to say about your work. And then if confidence is really the issue, and confidence in your business and your product is what's keeping you awkward or stilted or maybe just silent about sharing your work, sign up for the free Biz Confidence Challenge, which you can find at taraswiger.com/bizconfidence. That is going to be a 6-week challenge that will help you tap in to what you have already to be confident in your business. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to it on iTunes and leave a review. That helps other people find it. And I just want to thank you so much for listening, and I wish you a very happy, enthusiastically non-robotic day. Thanks so much for listening to Explore Your Enthusiasm.